Kongdae stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass of his penthouse office, his silhouette a sharp, jagged edge against the Seoul skyline. The city below was a hive of neon indifference, but inside the room, the silence was suffocating. He didn't turn when the door clicked open. He didn't need to. The soft, rhythmic scuff of sensible shoes told him exactly who had entered. Alana moved like a ghost, a quiet presence in a dark blue maid's dress that seemed to swallow her slight frame. She didn't look at him. She never did. Her focus was entirely on the mahogany desk, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly as she straightened a stack of folders. Kongdae felt a sudden, sharp ache in his chest, a phantom limb of a life he had discarded years ago. He turned slowly, his gaze heavy and unreadable. "You're late," he said, the words landing like stones in a still pond. Alana froze, her fingers hovering over a crystal paperweight. She didn't offer an excuse. She didn't tell him about the bus delay or the way her heart hammered against her ribs every time she stepped into this building. She simply lowered her head, the white lace of her apron stark against the deep blue fabric. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. Her voice was a fragile thing, easily broken. Kongdae took a step toward her, the expensive leather of his shoes silent on the plush carpet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled photograph, an image of an older African-American woman smiling brightly in a sun-drenched kitchen. He laid it on the desk between them. "I saw her today, Alana." At the clinic, Alana's breath hitched, a jagged sound that tore through the artificial stillness of the office. She looked at the photo, then at the man who held the power to unmake her world with a single phone call. The tension between them was a physical weight, a cord stretched to the point of snapping. The memory of the clinic was a sharp contrast to the cold steel of the skyscraper. 3 hours earlier, Kongdae had been sitting in his black sedan, watching the rain smear the windshield into a gray blur. He was there for a meeting he didn't want to attend, a transaction involving pharmaceutical supplies. Then he saw her. An older woman, her hair a crown of silver curls, leaning heavily on a cane. She had tripped on the curb, her grocery bag splitting open. Before his guards could react, Kongdae was out of the car. He had gathered the fallen oranges with a practiced grace that felt foreign to his blood-stained hands. When he handed them back, the woman didn't look at him with fear. She didn't see the boss of the most feared syndicate in the district. She saw a man. She reached out, her hand warm and papery against his cold skin, and patted his cheek. "Thank you, son," she had said, her eyes crinkling with a genuine, soul-deep kindness. "You have a good heart." "I can see it." Kongdae had stood frozen on the sidewalk long after she had disappeared into the building. No one had called him son in 20 years. Not since the dirt had settled over his own mother's casket in a village he tried to forget. Now, standing in his office, he looked at Alana, the woman's daughter, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed fortress beginning to crumble. He watched Alana's eyes well with tears she refused to let fall. She knew her mother was losing her grip on reality, that the dementia was weaving a tapestry of faces where strangers became family. But the weight of that word, son, hung in the air like a confession. Alana remembered the first time she brought the laundry home. Her mother, Beatrice, had been sitting by the window, humming a song that sounded like honey and wood smoke. Alana had been tired, her back aching from hours of scrubbing floors, but she had smiled for her mother's sake. "Who is the man you work for, baby?" Beatrice had asked, her eyes momentarily clear. Alana had hesitated, thinking of the cold, distant man who sat in the high tower. "Just a businessman, Mama." A busy man, but as the months passed and the shadows in Beatrice's mind grew longer, the businessman shifted. He became a figure of myth in her stories. She began to talk about a son who had gone away and finally come back. She would set an extra plate at the table, whispering prayers for a boy who wore suits and carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Alana never corrected her. It was a mercy she couldn't afford to take away. Seeing Kongdae now, standing in his pristine office with the photograph of her mother, Alana felt a terrifying intersection of her two worlds. She thought of the small apartment filled with the scent of cinnamon and the harsh, metallic reality of Kongdae's life. "She doesn't know who you are," Alana said, her voice finally finding a thread of strength. She sees what she wants to see. She's old, and she's tired, and she just wants her family back. Kangdae didn't move. He looked at the photo, his thumb brushing the edge of the frame. She called me son, he repeated, the words sounding strange and heavy in his mouth. Why Alana? Out of everyone in the city, why me? The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant hum of the office ventilation. Kangdae remembered his own mother's hands, rough from laundry, smelling of lye and cheap soap. He remembered the day he left, promising to bring back enough money to buy her a house with a garden. He had brought back the money, but he had brought it back too late. He had traded his soul for a throne of glass, and there was no one left to call him by his name. He looked at Alana, really looked at her, seeing the exhaustion etched into the corners of her eyes, and the way she held herself as if braced for a blow. She wasn't just a maid, she was a daughter holding onto a fading light. He felt a surge of something that wasn't anger or even pity. It was a raw, aching recognition. She thinks you're the one who sends the medicine, Alana whispered, her head bowed so low her chin touched the white lace of her collar. I told her a kind man helps us. She decided that man must be the son she lost years ago. She's not trying to insult you, Mr. Park. She's just lonely. Kangdae took another step, closing the distance until he could smell the faint scent of lemon polish and vanilla on her. He reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder before he pulled it back, afraid his touch would tarnish her. The skyscraper felt like a cage, and for the first time, he wondered if the woman in the photo was the only one who could see the bars. I went back, Kangdae confessed, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. After she called me that. I followed her to your apartment. I sat in the car for an hour, watching the light in your window. Alana looked up then, her brown eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hope. The power dynamic in the room shifted, the boss and the maid dissolving into two broken people standing in the wreckage of their own histories. You saw the flowers? She asked breathlessly. Kangdae nodded. He had seen the wilting daisies on the sill, the same kind his mother used to pick from the roadside. She told me you were a good boy, Kangdae said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, a look so rare it transformed his face from a mask of stone to something human. She told me you were working hard to take care of us. He paused, the emotional weight of the moment pressing down on them both. Why does your mother call me son, Alana? Is it because you told her I was? Or is it because she sees the ghost of the man I was supposed to be? Alana didn't look away this time. She saw the vulnerability in the Mafia boss's eyes, the wound that all the money and soul couldn't heal. She realized then that her mother wasn't just confused. In her fading wisdom, Beatrice had recognized a hunger in Kangdae that matched the void in their own lives. She calls you son, Alana said softly, a single tear finally escaping and trekking down her cheek, because she thinks you're the only one left who needs a mother as much as I do. The words hung in the air, a truth bomb that left Kangdae speechless. The king of the city humbled by the simple grace of a dying woman's love. Kangdae did not move for a long time. The neon lights of the city flickered to life outside, casting long, bruised shadows of purple and blue across the office floor. He looked at his hands, hands that had signed death warrants and crushed rivals, and then he looked at the small, fragile woman standing before him. The silence was no longer cold, it was thick with the scent of unsaid things. Alana wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, a quick, nervous gesture that made the lace of her cuff flutter. She expected him to dismiss her, to bark an order or return to the icy detachment that was his trademark. Instead, he pulled out the heavy leather chair behind his desk and sat down, not with the posture of a king, but with the heaviness of a man who had walked 1,000 miles in shoes that didn't fit. Sit down, Alana, he said. It wasn't a command. It was a request, whispered into the twilight of the room. She hesitated, her eyes starting to the door, then she sank into the chair opposite him. The mahogany desk felt like a vast ocean between them. Tell me about her, he murmured, his eyes fixed on the photograph. Tell me about the woman who thinks I am worth her prayers. Alana began to speak, her voice gaining a rhythmic, melodic quality as she described the Sunday mornings filled with gospel music, the way her mother could make a feast out of nothing but flour and faith, and the slow, agonizing way the fog had begun to settle over her memories. As she spoke, the skyscraper seemed to vanish, replaced by the intimate, sensory world of a home built on love rather than power. The narrative of their lives began to weave together in the quiet of the office. Alana spoke of the day her father left, a memory that mirrored Kangdae's own abandonment. She spoke of the sacrifices her mother had made, working 3 jobs until her knees gave out and her mind began to wander. Kangdae listened with a rapt intensity, his internal walls crumbling brick by brick. He saw the parallels, the way they both had been forged in the fire of necessity, the way they both carried the weight of their parents' dreams. He remembered a specific ritual from his childhood. His mother would always check the locks twice before bed, a small act of protection in a dangerous world. When Alana mentioned that her mother still insisted on checking the door twice every night, waiting for her son to come home, Kangdae felt a physical pang of grief. It was a bridge across time and culture, a shared language of the broken. "I haven't been home in 20 years, he admitted, his voice cracking. "I thought if I became powerful enough, the shame of where I came from would disappear. But she looked at me today, and she saw right through the suit. She saw the boy who used to steal oranges because he was hungry." He looked at Alana, his gaze searching. She didn't see a monster. She saw a son. The revelation was a quiet explosion, shifting the foundation of his identity. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the skyscraper changed. The guards noticed the boss was quieter, less prone to outbursts of cold fury. Alana still came to clean, but now there was always a small bag of groceries waiting for her by the door, expensive fruits, imported teas, and the specific brand of biscuits her mother loved. They didn't speak of it, but the ritual became their silent connection. One evening, the elevator doors opened to reveal not a business associate, but a small, determined figure. Beatrice had wandered away from the apartment, driven by a sudden, sharp clarity. She had found the address Alana kept in the kitchen drawer for emergencies. The security guards had tried to stop her, but there was an authority in her silver hair and steady gaze that gave them pause. When she reached the top floor, she walked straight past the secretary and into the inner sanctum. Kangdae was in the middle of a tense call, his face a mask of professional cruelty. He froze when he saw her. Beatrice didn't look at the luxury or the weapons. She walked up to him, adjusted his tie with trembling fingers, and sighed. "You're working too late again, baby," she scolded gently. "You'll ruin your eyes." The Mafia boss, the man feared by the underworld, let his phone drop to the desk. He stood there, paralyzed by a tenderness he didn't know how to receive. Alana rushed in a moment later, breathless and terrified, but she stopped when she saw them. Kangdae had reached out and was tentatively holding the older woman's hand, his thumb tracing the same papery skin he had touched on the sidewalk. The confrontation that followed was not one of violence, but of profound emotional surrender. Alana moved to take her mother's arm, her eyes pleading with Kangdae for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll take her home. It won't happen again." But Kangdae didn't let go. He looked at Beatrice, who was smiling at him with a purity of love that felt like a judgment on his entire life. "It's all right, Alana," he said softly. He turned back to the woman who called him son. "I was just finishing up, Mama. I'll drive you home." The walk to the elevator was slow. The office staff watched in stunned silence as their formidable leader escorted an elderly woman and a maid with the kind of reverence usually reserved for royalty. In the car, the city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of hope. Beatrice sat between them, humming that honey and wood smoke song, her hands resting on both of theirs. The car was a small, private sanctuary moving through a cold world. For the first time in his life, Kangdae didn't feel the need to look over his shoulder. He felt anchored. He realized that healing didn't mean forgetting the past, it meant finding a way to carry it that didn't break your back. He looked at Alana over her mother's head, a silent promise forming in the space between them. They were a family of choice, a collection of broken pieces that somehow made a whole. The story came full circle months later. The skyscraper still stood, a monument to ambition, but the office on the top floor felt different. There were photos on the desk now, not just of business deals, but of a sun-drenched kitchen and a woman with silver hair. Beatrice had passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand tucked into the hand of the man she believed was her son. Kangdae and Alana stood together at the window, watching the rain wash the city clean. The grief was there, bittersweet and heavy, but it was a shared weight. She knew, Kangdae said quietly, breaking the long, comfortable silence. Alana looked at him, her dark blue dress replaced by a simple sweater, her role no longer that of a servant. "What do you mean?" she asked. Kangdae pulled a small, worn envelope from his pocket. It was a letter Beatrice had written in a moment of lucidity, addressed to the man who found my oranges. "She knew I wasn't her biological son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She wrote that it didn't matter. She said a mother's love isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when the grocery bag breaks." He turned to Alana, the light of the setting sun catching the moisture in his eyes. "She gave me back my name, Alana. She gave us both a way home." They stood there, two orphans of the world who had found a family in the most unlikely of places. The neon city continued to hum below, but inside the glass tower, the silence was finally, beautifully at peace.